My sister sent me a text on a Thursday afternoon, and it was 12 words long. The gala is invitation only. High-value clients and investors, please sit this one out. I read it twice, then a third time. Then I put my phone face down on my kitchen counter and went back to my laptop, because I knew if I kept staring at it, I was going to say something I'd regret. I was 29 years old. I had a master's degree from MIT and a bowl of ramen going cold next to my keyboard. My family's real estate firm was holding its 40th anniversary gala at the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan that same night, and my sister had just asked me not to come. Politely, cleanly, like she was canceling a coffee plan. I spent that evening alone in my apartment in Brooklyn, watching the Instagram stories roll in. My mother in a burgundy gown, my father shaking hands with men in charcoal suits, my sister at the center of every frame, champagne glass raised, laughing at something off camera. And then, just after 9 o'clock, my phone lit up with her name. When I answered, she wasn't laughing anymore. "What did you do?" she said. Her voice was low and pressed flat and shaking at the edges. "There are people here pulling things up on their phones. Investors. They're showing me something and Darcy. What is this? What did you do?" I didn't answer that question. I let her keep talking. And when she finally ran out of words, I said goodnight and hung up. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand what those investors were looking at on their phones, I have to take you back 3 years. Back to the beginning, before the lawyers, before the recordings, before I fully understood what my family was capable of when their reputation was on the line. We weren't just successful, we were old Greenwich successful, which is its own specific category. Keller Realty Group had spent 40 years selling and managing luxury residential estate along Connecticut Gold Coast. My grandfather started it with a single storefront on Greenwich Avenue. My father scaled it into a firm that handled 8- and 9-figure listings for hedge fund executives and old money families who still had summer compounds in Watch Hill. Her name appeared in the acknowledgments of 2 different town centennial books. That's the kind of family we were. My sister was 5 years older than me, and she was built for it in ways I was not. She could walk into a room of strangers and within 20 minutes know everyone's first name, their spouse's name, what school their kids attended, and which golf club they belonged to. It was an instinct she had, the way some people have perfect pitch. By 25, she was closing 7-figure listings on her own. By 30, she was managing a team of 12 and flying to showcases in Palm Beach and Aspen. My mother introduced her to everyone as the future of the firm. My father gave her the corner office. I went to MIT. I studied computer science and stayed for a master's in machine learning because I had found something that made the world feel honest in a way nothing else did. Code either worked or it didn't. There was no charm required, no reading the room, no knowing which fork to use. My parents came to my undergraduate graduation. My mother took one photo and then checked her watch. My father missed my graduate thesis defense entirely. There was his inspection on a $14 million waterfront property in Old Greenwich that morning, and he said he couldn't reschedule. I didn't bring it up afterward. I already understood where I stood in the hierarchy of what mattered in our family. They weren't cruel. That's what people miss when I tell this story. They weren't cold in any deliberate way. They just had a very clear picture of what the Keller family was, and I was blurry. My mother once told me, warmly, with genuine affection in her voice but worried, I spent too much time in my own head. She compared me to my uncle. She bred to my uncle who bred dogs alone in Vermont. I understood the implication. I just didn't say so. When I started building PropSense, I didn't tell any of them. The idea had been forming for 2 years before I wrote a single line of code. Real estate valuation was a mess. Agents priced listings based on gut instinct, comp sheets, and whatever the market happened to feel like that week. Appraisers used methodologies that hadn't fundamentally changed since the 90s. I thought there had to be something better, a system that could analyze listing photos for structural condition and finish quality, cross-reference permit histories, flag neighborhood trend signals, and generate valuations that were faster and more accurate than anything a human appraiser could produce in the same window of time. I built it in my Brooklyn apartment over 18 months. Evenings, weekends, every lunch break I could carve out from my day job at a logistics software company. I used public data sources and licensed datasets I paid for out of my own pocket. 6 months into development, I partnered with a property management company in New Haven that let me run beta tests on their inventory. I documented everything obsessively, time-stamped commits in a private repository, internal memos to myself with dates and version notes, a paper trail so clean it could stand up anywhere. I didn't tell my family because I didn't trust the conversation it would start. The call came on a Sunday morning in February. I was in my pajamas eating cereal when my mother's name lit up my screen. "We need to talk about the firm," she said. Her voice had that specific tone, businesslike, slightly pressed, the one she used when a deal was getting complicated. "Your father and I have been in conversations with some institutional investors. They want to see that we're evolving, that we're using technology, not just talking about it. You understand these things. We need you to help your sister put something together for her next presentation." She didn't ask how I was doing. She laid out a problem and waited for me to agree to solve it. I told myself it was harmless. I could explain general concepts, describe how AI-driven valuation tools worked in theory, give them enough to sound credible in a pitch meeting without touching anything real. I said yes. My sister texted me the next morning. "This means a lot. Come to the office Saturday?" I drove up. The office smelled like fresh paint and coffee. She hugged me at the door, quick, efficient, the kind of hug she gave clients she liked but didn't know well. She led me back to the conference room, sat across from me with a legal pad open and said, "Walk me through how this technology actually works. The valuation side. How does a system like that function in practice?" I kept it surface level, computer vision basics, how machine learning models process image data, how you could train a system to recognize condition signals in listing photography. General concepts. I drew a rough diagram on the whiteboard and referenced 2 public research papers, nothing that touched what I was actually building. She filled 3 pages of notes. 2 weeks later, she sent me a draft of the investor deck. I opened it and felt something cold move through my chest. The slide on technology-driven valuation used phrases I recognized. Layered condition indexing, signal-weighted depreciation scoring. Those weren't industry-standard terms. Those were phrases from my own internal documentation, written in shorthand for myself because no one else had ever been meant to see them. I told myself she'd just absorbed the language from our conversation and written it down without realizing. I pushed the doubt away the same way you push a rock to the side of the trail because you don't want to deal with it right now. Then she asked me to attend the investor meeting. I went. The room was full of private equity people, the kind who own real estate the way other people own index funds. My sister stood at the front and presented a future where Keller Realty Group used proprietary AI-driven valuation to outperform every competitor in the luxury residential market. The slides had my frameworks, my language, my diagrams, cleaned up and reskinned with the firm's branding. One of the investors raised his hand. "Who developed the underlying methodology?" She smiled without missing a beat. "Our technical advisor has been instrumental on the research side." My sister. Instrumental. I sat in the back of the room and kept my face perfectly still. Afterward, she handed me a folder in the parking garage. Standard consulting agreement, she said. Just to formalize the arrangement. Protects everyone. It's the same document we use for all our outside advisors. I should have read every line of it. I should have sent it to a lawyer before I touched the pen. But I was standing in a parking garage in Greenwich while my sister waited with a smile that looked exactly like my mother's smile, and I signed it because she was my family. And some part of she was M's family, and some part of me still believed that word meant protection. There was a clause in the second to last paragraph that I missed. Any intellectual property developed in connection with advisory services rendered to Keller Realty Group, LLC, would be considered work product belonging to the firm. I didn't discover I'd signed that until 4 months later. The requests kept coming after that. Can you run these comps through your model? Can you show me how the image processing flags deferred maintenance? I gave her outputs, summaries, never source code, never architecture documentation. I thought I was being careful. I thought I was protecting the core of what PropSense actually was. The call came on a Wednesday night in October. She didn't start with hello. We need the full system, she said. Not concepts, not sample outputs. The actual model, the training data, the code base, all of it. The investors are moving to due diligence and they want to see a working product. You signed the consulting agreement. This is covered under the IP clause. I set down my coffee cup very carefully and said, that agreement covers work I did for the firm. PropSense was built before I ever sat down in that conference room. It's independent. She laughed, but there was nothing in it that resembled warmth. You used your time consulting with us to refine it. That creates a connection. Our attorney has already reviewed the language. I said no. My mother called the next morning. Darcy, this isn't a negotiation. The family needs you to do the right thing. The right thing. My mother had a remarkable ability to make theft sound like generosity. I said no again. 3 days later, my sister showed up at my door. She knocked at least. When I opened it, she walked in without being invited and sat down on my couch like she owned the room. She was wearing a coat that probably cost more than my rent. I need the platform, she said. The trained models, the database architecture, the front end, everything. You'll get a credit line in the firm's marketing materials. Technical consultant. It's a fair arrangement. I walked to the kitchen counter and picked up my phone. I opened the voice memo app and set it face down on the coffee table. New York is a one-party consent state, she kept talking. What you're doing is selfish, she said. You had an opportunity to contribute something real to this family, and you're making it a game. This firm was built over 40 years. If we lose these investors because you can't act like a professional, that's on you. Her voice got sharper the longer I stayed quiet. You've always done this. You stand in the corner being difficult, and then act surprised when no one includes you. You make everything harder. I let her talk for 11 minutes, I counted. When she finally stopped, I said I'd think about it. She left. I listened to the recording, 11 minutes of her telling me, in language that could not be misread, exactly what she intended to do whether I agreed or not. After that, the erasure started. Gradual, deliberate, the kind of thing you notice in pieces. My name disappeared from family email chains about gala planning. The group chat, where my mother sent updates, went quiet when I was reading. Then the invitation didn't come. I found out about the event from a LinkedIn post my mother made about it, and then the text. The gala is invitation only. Please sit this one out. In the weeks before the gala, I made sure everything was in place. My IP attorney had been working on the patent filing for 8 months. It was filed and time-stamped 11 months before I ever drove up to that Greenwich office. My graduate advisor, Dr. Vargas, had written a statement verifying the development timeline of PropSense in detail. And Reed, a former junior agent at the firm who had been quietly pushed out after refusing to falsify a disclosure document on a listing, had kept a copy of an internal memo where my sister had described proprietary AI valuation technology currently in development by Keller's technical division. That memo was dated 4 months after our first meeting. Reed had saved it on a personal hard drive because he'd suspected something was wrong even then. He was willing to go on record. I had been talking to a journalist at Business Insider for 6 weeks. The article went through 3 rounds of legal review. My editor called the night before it was scheduled to publish to confirm we were proceeding. We were. The piece went live at 9:04 p.m. while the gala was still running. I know the exact time because I was watching the clock. The headline was careful. PropTech founder alleges IP misappropriation by family real estate firm in investor push. But the content was not careful. It had the patent filing. It had the time-stamped repository commits. It had the consulting agreement, alongside a legal expert's analysis of exactly why the IP clause could not apply to work that predated the consulting relationship by 11 months. It had the side-by-side comparison of my original research white paper and the slides my sister had presented to investors. It had Reed's memo and Dr. Vargas's statement. PropSense had just closed a seed funding round 2 weeks prior. That was in the article too. I sat in my apartment and watched my phone. At 9:11 she called. I let it ring. At 9:14 she called again. I let it ring. When I finally picked up at 9:37, I could hear the muffled noise of the gala in the background. She had stepped out somewhere, a hallway, a coat room, somewhere the music was dampened. You timed this, she said. Her voice had lost all its texture. It was flat, empty. You did this on purpose tonight of all nights. Yes, I said. Investors are leaving. 2 of them walked out during dinner. Do you understand what you've done to this family? Good night, I said. I hung up. My mother called at 9:47. My father called at 10:12. I answered neither of them. The next 72 hours were louder than I had anticipated. Real estate trade publications picked up the story. A thread on a commercial real estate forum put the comparison together publicly. Brokers who had attended my sister's investor presentations were posting screenshots side by side with my white paper. The firm issued a statement that they were launching an independent review. My sister was placed on administrative leave 2 days after the gala. She resigned 6 days later. The firm's announcement was 2 sentences. Imogen Keller has stepped down to pursue other opportunities. Keller Realty Group remains committed to transparency and ethical business practices. No acknowledgement of the dispute, no apology. Her LinkedIn profile went quiet and stayed quiet. My father called on a Sunday night, 3 weeks later. I was reading when his name appeared on my screen. I answered on the 4th ring. He didn't say hello, he said. I want you to know that I knew. Not everything, but I saw the slides she was using and I suspected where the frameworks came from. I told myself it wasn't my place to ask. I told myself the firm had to come first and we'd sort everything out later. A pause. I told myself you'd be okay. I didn't say anything. I was wrong, he said. I let you get pushed out because it was easier than asking hard questions. I'm sorry, Darcy. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Okay, I said. And I hung up. That was the last real conversation I had with any of them. I went through my contacts that same night. My sister, my mother, my father. Relatives I knew would relay messages. I blocked every number, deleted the email threads, left the group chats I'd barely been participating in anyway. I didn't do it in anger, By then, the anger had already burned down to something quieter and more permanent. I did it because I finally understood there was no version of this story where we worked it out over dinner. There was no conversation that was going to make my mother admit she had chosen my sister at every decision point that year. There was no apology from my sister that was going to undo 11 minutes of audio. The cut was clean, and for the first time in years I slept without the low-grade hum of trying to figure out where I fit in a family that had already decided. In the months that followed, PropSense grew faster than I had planned for. The seed round covered 4 hires, 2 engineers, a product manager, and someone to handle partnerships. We signed agreements with 3 regional brokerages in the Northeast. The platform processed its first 10,000 valuations. Accuracy held within 4% of final sale prices on properties up to $5 million. The brokerages talked to their networks. The networks talked to others. By spring, we were in Series A conversations. The round closed at a number that put us in the trade press for reasons entirely separate from my family. I gave my first public talk at a Women in Real Estate conference in Chicago. 200 people in a hotel ballroom. My hands were shaking badly enough before I walked out that I had to press my notes flat against my thigh to keep them still. I talked about what it meant to build something in secret because you already knew the people closest to you would find a way to claim it. About the particular loneliness of being the person in the room who thinks differently and gets managed instead of heard. About patents and paper trails and why you should never sign anything for a family business without your own attorney reading every line first. A woman in the 3rd row was crying. She came up afterward and told me her brother had been doing the same thing to her for 3 years with software she'd built for their family's logistics operation. She had the documentation but had been too afraid to use it. I gave her my attorney's card. That felt like the whole point if there was one. My sister tried real estate consulting after she resigned. A few smaller agencies gave her a chance. The industry is smaller than it looks from outside, and word moves through it the way word moves through any world where everyone went to the same 10 schools and summers in the same 10 places. Nothing stuck. Last, I heard she had moved to Charlotte and was doing residential property management for a mid-sized development company. A different scale, farther from the trajectory she had spent a decade building. The firm survived technically. My parents brought in an outside COO and repositioned as a boutique operation. They sold 2 satellite offices and pulled back from the institutional investor relationships that had started everything. My mother hosts fewer events. My father plays more golf. I hear this secondhand because I stopped looking. PropSense operates in 16 states now. We have an office in Soho, whiteboards on every wall, and 18 people who chose to be there. The patent is framed on my office wall. Next to it is a photo from our first company, All Hands. 12 people crowded around a folding table in my apartment, eating pizza. That's what the beginning looked like. I keep it there so I don't forget. The things I know now: file your patent before you share anything, even a concept, even with someone you trust. Never consult for family without your own legal before you sign. Document in real time. Timestamps, screenshots, recordings where the law allows. Blood doesn't automatically mean protection. Loyalty without reciprocity is just obligation wearing a familiar face. And the quietest person in the room is sometimes building something that nobody in that room can see yet. If any part of this is your story too, keep going. The receipts you have right now are worth more than you know. And whatever you built in the margins of your life, in the evenings, in the hours no one else wanted, in the rooms where no one was watching, that belongs to you. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise.